rights of workers, the school is teaching to follow the rules with respect to authority, which is not always about the dignity of work and the rights of workers. In fact, frequently, it's not. Increasingly, the worker is considered as fungible as a box of copy paper. So I could go on, there's more, but in fact, God's creation or interconnected world. Are the students learning? Big issue. No, they're not. Not in either context. In the Catholic teachings at the end of 4 years of university education, I don't have statistics on what comes right after high school. But even after university education, only 23% are somewhat or very familiar with Catholic social teaching, and 13% are somewhat or very familiar with global solidarity. That's a problem. No, also on the social studies, 50% or more of teachers are very or somewhat confident that the students graduate knowing the 11 of those first 12 on the list. Only 20% sure are very confident. I mean, that's abysmal. That further, in the 2012 presidential election voter turnout, only 58.7% of the voters in the United States voted. I mean, there are people in the world dying in order to have the right to vote. Yeah, we don't bother. Of the voters aged 18 to 29, the ones who most recently went through the social studies curriculum, only 45%. And jury duty avoidance is on the rise. I have questions. So we have a thing called No Child Left Behind. It's a federal legal thing that requires schools to make sure children can read and do math. But that means that the rewards and punishment are all based in that, not in citizenship. Religious extremism is partly at the root of the Tea Party fragmenting of the Republican Party and the shutdown a few weeks ago. And Catholics are out there on that right wing, and those are the Catholics who don't pay any attention to Catholic social teaching. How does the media play into this? We could spend another whole conference on that one. With pluralism, we used to have a sort of vaguely Protestant public religious education in the schools. It at least had a shared vision for justice and the common good. When we took all religion out of the schools, it meant that there's no common language or rationale anymore. We need to learn how to talk toward a rationale common good. Corporate and economic interests are now far bigger than the person or the society in many aspects of the United States public life. Answering perhaps, or a question that might answer what Juan raised at the end of the last session, can the Occupy movement, which has been dormant for now a year and a half, does it offer a new voice for all of this? Sorry. And what about the undocumented in the United States? There are more than 11.9 million undocumented people living in the United States. Some of them are better citizens than the documented ones. And with that, I will end. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Daly. Now I would like to introduce our third speaker, last but not the least. Dr. Salahuddin Turan is a professor in the Department of Educational Sciences at Eskişehir Osman Gazi University, Turkey. He received his BA from Ankara University in 1990, MA in 1993, and PhD in 1998 from the Ohio University, and joined the Eskişehir Osman Gazi University College of Education faculty in 1996. His professional interests are educational policy and leadership, the organizational psychology of books, the organizational psychology, of Organizations and Alternative Perspectives in Education. He co-authored many books in educational studies, with being the editor of Journal of Education and Humanities, Theory and Practice, and the editorial boards of the Turkish Journal of Educational Administration. He has also published widely in a variety of scholarly journals and presented papers at the annual meetings of different national and international organizations. He is currently the Dean of the College of Education at Eskişehir Osman Gazi University and the President-Designate of Economic Cooperation Organizations, ECO, Educational Institute in Ankara. Please join me to welcome Dr. Turan.
I'll try to finish in 10 minutes or 10 to 15 minutes in my presentation. I'm going to raise some questions and issues related to citizenship education and secularization in public education, and try to give a brief outline what we are discussing last at least 90 years after the declaration of Turkish Republic in 1920s. Historically, I do not want to go back to historical and legal background of the citizenship education and legal foundation for that, but I have to mention that the law of unification of education, which has been discussed a lot since the early 1920s, because the law of unification of education took under the control of all educational institutions under the Ministry of Education. That was the main goal, to control the content of education, and basically after almost 50 years later in 1973, the basic law of national education emphasized the importance of citizenship education or citizenship education. That was basically, in traditional sense, both law is focused on social engineering for nation building. Probably we may discuss emphasizing both law emphasized secular education and citizenship education that create tension from the early beginning between the secular people or secular elitists and the devoid Muslims. But in the early 1920s, school types also, I have to mention that, vocational schools, general high schools, and Islamic schools created by the law, which was a discussion a lot. The second problem is probably the definition of citizenship in the country. Focus on citizenship education has resulted from basically from government's definition of citizenship and perceptions of citizens. And that was a discussion between two people and the government. But basically, in the early Republican years, from 1920s until probably the 1950s, I may say that good citizens equal secular citizens. So without secular citizens, understanding good citizens is not problematic, because definition in the content of education, or if I call the philosophy of education or the principles of education, emphasize the importance of secular education, secular teachers, secular public schools. So from the beginning, it was the main issue that we have to change the concept of citizenship or citizen education in the context of social, political, and economic arrangements of the Republic. Another thing that I have to mention that definition of citizenship from Ottoman Empire to Republican area. During the Ottoman Empire, imperial perspectives and citizenship education, all ethnic groups called nations. For example, Armenian nations or other ethnic nations. But nation or refer to the people of a group of ethnic people. So that was more general definition of citizenship, but in the early. And after that, to constitute Europe, I may say that the content and the definition of citizenship education is different, 1921, 1924. But after 1961, the Constitution 1962, which focused on Article 62, Citizenship is gained with the conditions stated in the law and attained within the circumstances stated in the law. So it focuses on basically in the law and the basic educational law and the Minister of Education other legal documents. Citizenship, education, and national identity go by hand. So it's almost the same. And even in the definition of citizenship, those who belong to the Turkish constitution are called Turks, for example, ignoring the early Ottoman Empire. So in the after 1990s, democratic culture and democratic schools in recent 10 years emphasize too much. For example, now the basic tension between Turkish citizenship and European citizenship. The concept, for example, European Education Commission supports and provides a lot of financial support to create the democratic schools and the focus on European citizenship. That was another most recent problems. The other two dimensions that I have to mention, that the existence and the manner of the concepts of country, nation and religious community in the Muslim minds. I think that's the problematic, and we have to discuss. We do not have too much empirical work about in the mind of people in the community in Muslims. The destructive attitude of republic to past and religion since its foundation in the early 1920s created a tension between the state itself and the people. So I may say that even though we do not have very comprehensive and nationwide research, and the people has a negative attitude towards secularism and state and citizenship. So, two basic, I may say that citizenship perception in Muslims' mind, two basic impetus, both by religion and both by government. So that's the I may say that we have to go into a deeper discussion and research to see how, even though I may say that 20 years are changing the perception of government and democratization process, European integration process, but still the tension goes on between. The reason for the not forming perception of citizenship in education institutions, there are two reasons, for example. Even in the elitist government periods, education community was made up of people coming from low middle socioeconomic class. That's very important because the educational principles or educational law sees that secularization or public school must be secular. So most of the people, which is around now almost 70,000 teachers in Turkish public schools, all of them coming from middle class, and most of them carrying Islamic attitude and practices and in their life. We do not see secularism and citizenship as a positive thing. So, within this, in your mind, I may raise some basic questions. As I mentioned that we are taking now a very comprehensive empirical study about the conception. How is the formation of citizenship and the related concepts of nation, religious community, country in the Muslims' mind? How the geographical and political borders stick in the Muslim mind? For example, no borders for Muslims when you take a look at in the early 1980s political movement, especially Islamic movements. So no borders for Muslims because that was the political movement in the early 19th. Most of the Muslim intellectuals and secular elitist intellectuals, that was the big discussion in the early 1980s. So another basic question that I have to ask and answer, what degree did the relationship between ongoing government structure in Turkey and the phenomenon of Islamism and Muslimism in a quotation? And is a historical condition enabling to build sympathetic relationship between an individual identifying himself or herself with upper Muslim identity and the government in question? So even the Muslims has its identity problem. So in general it says that. And the problems about citizenship in Turkey are usually resulted from inconsistency or paradox between the expectation of individuals and the government. So the definition by secularism as citizenship by the government, at the same time the people perception towards the citizenship and or even now European citizenship as a problematic in their mind. And also another tension that created by concept concerning citizenship, implementation of secularization or citizenship education. For example, Islamic lifestyle and in the public domain. Still now is in Turkish politics going on. So parliament members. Islam has an effect on every stage of life, social life, from the problems needs to be discussed in details. Islam has an effect on every stage of social life. Even we discuss, for example, the good citizens, good Muslims, good citizens, secular citizens, and this kind of concepts are really needs to be discussed in details and from the people perspective rather than defined by the government or the elitists. The debates of religion and secularism in Turkey, and we need, because we do discuss almost last 60, probably 70 years, there's still a discussion going on in relation to the citizenship. Both the language used in constitution and discourse used by certain political fractions pose an obstacle for rising citizenship as a surrounding upper identity in community and cause the exist people feeling left out according to the changing political context. That creates the people who control power and define everything. So basically, the majority of society in Turkey adopt an Islamic lifestyle or demand an Islamic lifestyle. So that's great tension between what the modern society is. The final comments, or as a summary, I say that we need more discussion, but